Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We are so happy to see you today and welcome you all to a full house. I can see a lot of the names already popping up. I see the attendance filling in. So find your seats, make sure you're buckled in and you got your coffees to go through today's session. We have a lot of treats for you today. Starting off, I'd like to introduce ourselves, our hosts, and our speakers today. I'll be your moderator today, James Frankham. I'm here supporting Talia as well as Ulrich, who are the subject matter experts who are going to be walking you through the different topics and the different subjects and our journey today. Now, before we do that, I really want to introduce each one of our speakers just so that you know who they are, a little bit about their backgrounds, and a little bit about where they came from and where their expertise lays in. I'll start with Talia. Talia is conducting data integrity assessments in the life science industry within the area of GMP manufacturing, supports clients with setting up quality management systems and performing risk assessments, and has been co-auditor in supplier management activities within the GCP, GCLP, and GVP scope. Following her PhD in molecular biology, Talia gained experience in GCP operations through managing clinical investigator sites in diverse therapeutic settings via central monitoring, utilizing a variety of widely used clinical systems and tools, such as the EDC, IRT, CTMS, and TMF systems, to support many aspects of GCP compliance. Ulrich is our second speaker today. And Ulrich has been on the forefront of compliance technologies since the beginning of it. Ulrich is a partner at GxP-CC, and his expertise lies in life science compliance, in particular specialization in data integrity and audits. He runs the GCP Compliance Academy, bringing the brightest minds from academia into industry. Ulrich has been on the forefront of data integrity initiatives in his previous 8 years within our organization, and he has supported many organizations in the pharmaceutical and biotech sector executing data integrity campaigns. Ulrich has experience in consulting for audit preparation and conducting in the GMP and GCP area, and precedes special interest groups and affiliations. Furthermore, Ulrich has trained international agencies on behalf of ICH on the ICH quality guidelines Q9 and Q10. Ulrich is also a program committee and speaker at international conferences, and is a welcome panelist with the DIA, the PDA, FDA, and other industry affiliate forums. Ulrich has a PhD in physics in the area of medical imaging from the Technical University Munich, and was educated at the Harvard Business School. He lives in Germany and is a guiding light in the local life science community. Now, without further ado, I really want to hand over to my colleagues to go through this session. Talia and Ulrich, the floor is yours, and I'll be running the polls in the background. But just one more thing, sorry, I did want to mention that. For all of you attending our session today, if you'd like to reach out to us, there's a chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to use that. Put in your messages or put in your Q&As. I'm just going to write hi all here and send this out. You kind of see it pop up on the top right-hand side of your screen. So you'll have a chat window that's available for you. Also a Q&A session. Feel free to use it at any time. We won't be calling out your name. We won't be saying who said it, but we do want to bring it out to the team so that everyone has a chance to learn from each other. We're recording this session as well. And we will be posting it afterwards for those who couldn't join us today. That's why anything you put in, like I said, we're not gonna shout out your name, but we will make sure that your question can be answered and that we can work together with you on all the great session here. We also have a couple of polls that I'm going to kick off in just a moment. But before we do that, I'm handing over to Ulrich. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, James, for the very nice introduction and opening the floor today. And now also our audience is filling up at 4 p.m. here in Europe. You know, people are coming from their day-to-day business and take this nice knowledge extra this evening or this afternoon. So thank you, everybody, for joining today. We will talk about data integrity in good clinical practices today. Here's our program. I will provide a little introduction on data integrity in general, but also with the relevance of GCP. We will go to the scope of GCP, of course, obviously. We'll have a little section on system validation and cloud solutions, because this is a really hot topic in the area of good clinical practice. Third-party management will play a big role, because it is a big role in the sector. And then we will close our session with two very interesting case studies, very freshly taken from a very recent symposium from FDA, MHRA, and Health Canada. So let's get started with the content. Of course, I think everybody of you knows that the data is really at our core of our business, because data is the backbone of our industry. So on the one hand, data integrity helps to prevent harm from customers and patients. Be aware that patients are our customers, so they might be in a severe state and really rely on us and on our compliant and correct functioning, which is reflected, of course, by the data. So we bring in objective evidence that everything went right. And of course, last but not least, data integrity is also key to respond to regulatory bodies, like in audits, but also when we talk about submissions, as it is the case for clinical studies. I always like to share the viewpoint of data integrity being a not one-dimensional approach. So let's see the columns here, processes, systems, and procedures. We can put them together to the hard facts, because they are relatively easy to change, whereas the soft facts like quality culture and people's mindset, you can imagine that they are much more difficult to change. But we need to take all into account to stay in this picture. Of course, if the columns are not stable, our temple will crash. And often these soft facts are, so to say, underestimated in the projects, in the data integrity projects. I don't want to bother you with the basic data integrity stuff, like the Alcoa principle. I hope that you came across those principles. If not, please also have a look at our other webinars in order to learn more about that. But in very short, data needs to be attributable to a person with access control, for example. It needs to be legible. And there, the long retention periods in the clinical setup bring a challenge. It has to be contemporaneously recorded, which is documented by timestamps, automatic timestamps in the systems. We need to keep original or true copy data and verify this throughout the retention, also with the use of audit trails. And of course, our data needs to reflect the truth, which means it has to be accurate. And then you also might know that there are some variations of this principle, the Alcoa Plus, or very recently the Alcoa Plus Plus principle, published by EMA, which adds some more topics here. The plus plus, which is new, stands for traceable. But I want to throw a bigger light away from this very standard definitions and give you the overview that we don't only need data integrity. Data integrity, in short, means that we got our data right, but we also need data quality, which, for example, also includes that we have the right data. So data which is fit for the intended use for the decision making. So from data, we gather information, and from there we can gather knowledge and make the correct decision, which we can call data-driven decision making. And it's a very big point in the revision of ICHQ9, where we also had a talk about.
Ulrich?
Yes.
I think this slide is so interesting because there's so many things that's going on in the data area and also the data integrity area. And as it's a workshop in this webinar, we'd really like to have our audience also I hope you got your coffees because we're gonna have your input to help guide the next couple of slides. Like Ulrich said, there's a couple of topics on here which you may have had the chance to see in previous guidelines or in previous information, or also on our other webinars, which I'll be posting afterwards. But just to get a kind of feel for why you're here today, we put out a little poll right here. Just open it up. It should pop up on your screen. Just pick why you're here today, right? You want to learn more about the audit trails and their review. You want to learn more about data retention, working with third parties, cloud compliance, or the holistic usage of governance and management of data that's out there.
Thank you, James. Great.
Yeah.
You got 2 votes, by the way. You will see that when the screen pops up, and we see that it fills up. I will let it run a bit and then come back to the result. Cool. So one key aspect we're always stating out is the aspect of critical thinking. Critical thinking means that there's no one size fits it all approach. So we are not throwing always with the same weapon or ball onto a problem, but we need to have adequate tools with an adequate level of formality and level of effort, of course. I like very much the PICS guideline on data integrity and data management, where we have a big data governance a section around. And this also speaks about this, so that critical thinking shouldn't only used by us as a pharmaceutical industry or pharmaceutical company, but also by the inspectors. So also the inspector should, of course, focus on the places where it matters. So this is a core thought we're always eager to bring in. And last but not least, it is a life cycle approach. So data integrity is not a one-time issue, but it's of course developing with the product life cycle and with the systems. So it's really a life cycle approach, and we should really think from the beginning, which is meant by data integrity by design. So let's have a little look at the result. So we got 26 responses already. So keep responding. And yeah, the biggest thing is really data governance, data management, James. So
Yeah.
I think that's surprising, because I always I voted personally for data retention, as it's very challenging. But yeah, I think that's nice, because we got a lot on data governance, data management throughout this class, throughout this session.
Yeah, it's data governance with a short. I mean, the second and third place right here, audit trails and contracting with third parties. But the clear winner here, data governance and management of data. And I think that kind of gives you guys a little bit of a perspective of what we're looking at for the session.
Great. Cool. Thank you for the participation. And Talia, I will hand over to you. You will lead us into the scope.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, great. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yeah.
All right. So first, hello from me as well. And thank you, Ulrich, for the introduction. We're going to discuss before getting into more details about the scope of good clinical practices and the integrity of the data. Next slide, please. So first of all, we have to take into consideration the phases of development of a drug that GCP is applicable in, and this is throughout the development from the time of the investigational drug application all to after. All through after commercialization. Sometimes it even applies in phase 4 studies, even without intervention, especially when the data from these studies will then be used to, for previous slide, please, to get regulatory decisions. Of course, we always have to consider, as Ulrich mentioned before, the entire data lifecycle within the clinical lifecycle, which spans far beyond the end of a trial, as the data in many cases need to be retained for many years after the end of a trial, such as 35 or 25 or 30. So let's consider all the phases of clinical development, but also all the phases of the data lifecycle. Next slide, please. Today, we are going to discuss we're going to focus on 3 guidelines, one updated one from the FDA, with a Q&A to inform with the latest updates of previous guidance. The the formalized, the formal latest version of the EMA guidance for clinical systems in trials, and the newest revision of the ICH E6, revision number 3. Most of the focus is going to be around the ICH E6 update, as this is the industry standard that is used by all regulatory agencies around the globe. This one was updated. A new revision was deemed necessary, as the previous one, according to feedback from the stakeholders, had a one-size-fit-all approach that was not really applicable and was not enhancing the implementation of GCP principles in the evolving landscape of clinical trials. So the updates of the revision 3 of the ICH is serving to exactly this. It enhances risk-based approaches to implement good clinical practices depending on the nature of the trial and the systems used. It also addresses complexities of the current regulatory landscape. Next slide, please. We lost James. All right, so central to data governance within GCP are the two responsible parties of the trial, which are the sponsor and the investigator. They are both required for the trial, and they retain data ownership at different levels. And they're responsible for managing the integrity of the data, traceability, and the security of the data. And how is this managed? By ensuring that the data, there are processes in place that ensure confidence in the data of the trial, which will support later good decision making. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. And how is this done? The best way is to think about it in two levels, because in a trial we have processes and we also have systems, and we have more and more systems as trials get more and more decentralized and relying on digital solutions. Both these processes and systems need to consider how the patient safety is going to be preserved and how the data of the trial are going to be reliable. Next slide, please. Which will, and these considerations should be taken into account when designing the processes and the systems in order to implement a risk-based approach, which takes into consideration, next slide please, the criticality of the data, but also the entire life cycle of the data. So when somebody, for instance, designs a process for which is not so highly critical, such as patient reimbursement, versus a system that controls reporting of serious adverse events that has a very important impact to the outcome of the trial and the safety of the patients. Somebody would realize that the second part is more high risk, so the effort should be focused there on implementing the proper controls to ensure the safety of the patient and the good outcome of the trial. Next one, please. So the topics that need to be where data governance should focus on in a clinical trial involve data protection, management of computerized systems in order to safeguard essential trial elements which are detrimental for the outcome of the trial, such as randomization, dose escalation, or blinding, and also to support decision making, such as finalization of the data and unblinding, but also allocation of datasets for analysis. Next slide, please. When it comes to criticality and risks, apart from ICH E6, one should consider also the underlying ICH E8, which sets the ground for risk-based decision making and for prioritization of activities based on importance. And both of them focus on one key aspects: how to preserve quality in the clinical trials. First of all, by implementing quality by design, a term first seen in manufacturing, but also now implemented in clinical trials, which means design of the processes and systems, as we mentioned before, based in order to preserve the integrity of the data, but also promoting a quality culture, which is enhanced and supported by management to encourage investigation and reporting, but also to use proportionate approach to resolve critical errors. How to achieve now risk management? This is done at two levels. First of all, in the planning phase, in the design phase, where critical components and data are identified, and then risk controls are implemented to mitigate them, but also during operation with the correct control implementation, but also by considering the clinical trial and the data as throughout the life cycle. Any event that would change a system or a process would need us to reevaluate our risks and implement new controls and mitigate the risk. And of course, a risk should be measures should be proportionate to the risks to the risk on the trial data, and also to the reliability of the data and the safety of the patients. Next slide, please. Which brings us to the next section of the talk that is going to focus on system validation and cloud solutions. And Ulrich will start with this now.
Yeah, thank you, Talia, for the nice overview. In this chapter, what I really like comes out very well is this proportionality to the GMP phase, as you explained, right? We got quality by design, we got risk-based approaches, and you see there are many similarities. And of course, this is also true for computerized systems. So I don't want to deep dive into this slide, because you could, of course, bring half an hour also there on CSV here. Computer system validation. However, I want just to show the main parts, what should be in place and which is named in the EMA guideline. James just sent around the link a minute ago. Of course, you need to have, and I think I want to start with this point, fitness for intended use. So we are always validating for the intended use. And this is, of course, also true for clinical trials. So we really need to get a well-described process diagrams, data flow mapping, in order to be sure that we are validating for the correct thing. System description is relatively straightforward. Of course, clinical systems can be very complex. They are often decentrally deployed. So I think it's a very important factor. We need to, of course, to have our SOPs in place and train them accordingly. And one factor I want to be a bit closer on, or bit deep dive into, that is security and access control. So why is that? Because you often got many entry points in clinical systems. So I think there is an enhanced need to focus on this aspect in this scenario. Again, we have a life cycle for our system. So also the system is not a one-time thing, but it also lives and gets updates, upgrades, whatever. And throughout this life cycle, we need to really take a focus on user management, on authentication, password, and remote connections. You can see that there is a big link between the GMP or GCP part, in the sense, and the security settings from cybersecurity standpoint of view. Why is that? Because they both have the same goal. So we need to have our data right and safe and reliable. With the clinical trials, of course, we also have this factor of data privacy, which plays a big role, because in the end, data shouldn't be publicly available, traced back to the patient. So the security settings are very important. This also includes data backup strategies. We have to have stringent data backup strategies in place, and procedures for data backup, disaster recovery, and vulnerability management, such as security patching or penetration testing. And just a touch point on that, we are getting now more and more into the question of cloud solutions and data centers. Of course, there's also a nice description about this topic in the EMA guideline, as you can see here. So also we need to ensure a quality approach for our data centers, for our technological suppliers, where we can also help with supporting in audits or in third-party contract writing. So again, there are many parties involved in these kind of systems, and therefore the responsibility definition gets even more important. As a side note, when we talk about security, in cloud systems, in public cloud systems, we are now talking about the case open systems. So most of you might know the distinguishing in the part 11, where we got open system and closed systems. And for open systems, we have to have additional controls in place, like encryption of data, encryption of passwords, and authentication, and to have encryption of our data in rest and in transit. Again, you could create an own talk on this topic for sure for an hour. So I will hand it over to Jalea back again to get into the QMS.
Let me just jump in there. Right when the handover comes in, I'm checking the chat room and things like that, and next to spamming everybody in the call, I'm also reading the Q&As that you have. So one of the questions that came up, I just want to kind of jump into these and toss them to the two of you as well. One of them came in was, where's the video going to be posted? For the audience, if you go into the Q&A session, whenever I answer a question, we're going to write it in there as well, and you can see that. So where's the video going to be posted? That one's easy. It's going on our YouTube channel, so it stays a little bit with our editing team. They make it look nice and pretty. Get their sound bites so we can have our LinkedIn spam machine running. But then we get it out on YouTube. But there was another question in here where I think is probably even super important here for the both of you to answer. Which study phase should protocol-specific risk assessments be conducted?
Yeah, so right, of course, one answer is straight from the beginning, because we need to have the risk management in place throughout the complete trial. If you think about this quality by design approach, and now I'm speaking also a bit for GMP, Talay, please correct or jump in if you want to add something. But quality by design means from the beginning, and it can develop. So it's sometimes the case that something happens, and then we can react and update our risk management plans.
From my side, I think that it's a very tricky question, mostly because so many things need to be set up during the design phase of a trial. Of course, as you will see in the next few slides, the requirements when we talk about a system should be based on the protocol and the data points which are considered critical based on the protocol. So in that sense, when we design a system, and a process for a system, we need to first have a protocol in place to know which data are to be collected and are critical for our analysis. So I think that it should be made and designed at the risk assessment should take place after the system is designed and when it is set up to be, I guess, before testing, so that also the testing can be implemented based on the risk assessment. This would be my suggestion. But it's very tricky. I understand that.
Thank you, both of you. Just asking the audience I hope we were able to answer that question. If you could just give me a little thumbs up. Otherwise, please, if you'd like to know more, just put it into the chat, and I'll toss it in your next handover between the two of you. Thank you.
So when we speak about system validation, what regulators expect is to have at all times a system which is fit for purpose. And how can one do that and also implement quality by design is to start by having a defined system. Then once the system is defined, in order to address the topics, the data of the trial and the outcome and the question in place, the risks need to be assessed to see what are the critical points that need to be controlled, and the proper mitigation measures should be implemented. Then, once this is defined, these points need to be tested during the testing phase to in comparison to the predetermined specifications in order to show that the system is functioning as it is expected to do so. And as mentioned before, this should be a life cycle approach. So at any point of the trial, a sponsor or an investigator, in the case a system is run by an investigator, should be able to show that the system remains in validated state. And of course, all this should be based on a robust underlying QMS to drive the process of validation. Next slide, please. So there's a special annex in the EMA guideline on computerized systems on CSV where many topics about validation are discussed, including user requirements, configurations, validation test plans and reporting, release, the need to have a user help desk to report issues and incidents, periodic review and change control. However, here, for the sake of this presentation, we're going to focus on documentation and user requirements, because we have seen also that there are always issues with these records and documents that create problems on the long run. Next slide, please. So first of all, it is very clear that documentation of validation need to be available at all times, whether a system is developed internally or what is mostly the case by a vendor. In both cases, the sponsors are obliged by regulations and guidances to preserve access for inspectors to this documentation in order to prove continuously that the systems used within the trial are in a validated state. Furthermore, user requirements is a very important procedure, document, or record, however it's done in each company, in order to describe the system functionality and design in order to address the main questions of the trial according to the protocol and ensure compliance with SCH E6. And this involves all the steps of the data lifecycle, from capture to analysis, reporting, and archiving of the data. Next slide, please. Within the Annex 2 of the EMA guidance, there are several specific topics and areas that are suggested to be addressed when someone develops user requirements, including operational and functional controls, of course, data integrity topics and technical aspects. A very important topic, interfaces between systems, especially needs to be considered in the scope of clinical trials that so many systems and stakeholders and vendors participate in this life cycle of the data, but also controls for performance, availability, security, and regulatory topics. Next slide. All these topics and requirements should be the basis for the design of a new system, or in case of purchasing or configuration for these aspects. And of course, these should be then tested to prove that the system functions as it's supposed to, and be retained to support validation. Next slide. What is to be highlighted here is that the sole responsibility and ownership for the URS lies within the responsible party, in this case, the sponsor, if they develop the system. Next slide. The updated FDA guidance, the Q&A to the guidance, also agrees with the aforementioned points. The FDA also encourages sponsors to follow a risk-based approach when it comes to the validation of electronic systems, and to base those efforts on criticality, the significance and the purpose of the record, the intended use of the system, and of course the nature of the electronic system. They also highlight the changes in electronic systems should be validated based on risk. So every time there is a change, either to the system itself or the trial, which requires a change to the system, such as an amendment, there should be a reevaluation of whether a new validation round is required or not, and of course documented. Next slide. Now, having gone through what is required for computer system validation, I thought that it would be nice to present two common findings of inspections when it comes to wrongdoings in the GCP area for data integrity. The first one is around the validation of an ECRF, so a data capture system, which was not designed or validated to collect properly the primary efficacy endpoint as it was described in the protocol. The result was that the collected data did not contain all the variables which were required for the appropriate analysis of the data, and therefore the primary endpoint of the study could not be analyzed properly. Of course, this was against the ICH E6 requirement for validation to show fitness for purpose, and at the end it invalidates the study because nobody can answer to the scientific question at the end. Next slide, please. The second example involves an IRT system, interactive response system, which is usually very critical as it controls randomization or blinding or medication attribution. In this case, the IRT system was test script was not did not include testing for all the requirements. This resulted in a critical functionality which had to do with the randomization to not be performed, and with the really bad outcome of not performing properly the patient randomization, which again, it's really detrimental and crucial for the outcome of the trial. And with that, I would like in the next slide to go to the next section of the talk, which is about the sponsor responsibilities when it comes to with focus on data integrity. Next slide, please.
Talia,
I think one question fits perfectly in that. James, go ahead.
Exactly. I just want to line you up with the next questions. This is great. I love this. I love to have audience participation. We love to have audience participation. And we got a couple of questions in, and I think some of them will even fit right into this topic. Is it okay if we do a short lightning round and kind of just hammer them out, and then we kind of go through the next one? Is that okay for you, Talia and Ulrich?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I got them numbered here. I think I'll do a quick lightning round of the questions. So considering enterprise QA are not involved in the study, built in IRT, ePro, EDC, and mainly handled by clinical data management and clinical operation group, who has a limited understanding of technology, how do we ensure data integrity? So I think that the main question here is, if the QA is not directly involved in the study, how do we make sure that data integrity is being met, that all the requirements are being fulfilled?
May I go for this one? Because we had similar experience in the past. So this is really a challenge. So you got the highly technical systems, which can be provided by technical vendors, like the IRT systems or also the EDC systems. So highly complex systems. You got the people conducting the study, supporting the studies, entering the data, and you got QA, of course. And I think the key element here to bring it together, and it has been underestimated in the past, is setting a highlight on data integrity and third-party management. This holds as well true in the GCP area as in the GMP area, but in the GCP area, it's even more present. So we got this high interaction between different parties. So it has to be really clear in contracting, what are the responsibilities, how is the data handled, for example, when is the data locked and given over from one party to another, like for example from the CRO to a sponsor, and so on. So I think this is really a core question, and there's not this one simple answer. On the other hand, of course, if we're speaking about a good technical vendor, the good technical vendor will be much better in designing quality into a technical system. And therefore, again, the QA oversight via the third-party management, via audits, and there, I mean, real audits, not just sending a paper and saying okay to the paper, but really conducting audits, talking about the quality management systems of a vendor, and still have an open decision, pro or against the vendor. This is the key where we can support with this question.
Thank you, Ulrich. Though I'll just line up the next one here. And this one I think is about segmentation of duties, right? Segregation of duties, who's doing what, who's on first, pretty much. So this one goes into, there's a mention about approver performing data audit trail review prior to approval. So someone goes in and checks the data audit trail review prior to approval. How do we expect this to be done by the principal investigator who's signing off on the CRF?
Yeah.
So the approver, maybe I can see directly the question because it's not very clear to me. From the data management perspective, who does the review of the audit trail in this case?
So maybe we'll make the question a little bit more broader or a little bit more general. When we look at audit trail review and we look at who's supposed to be doing it and how do we make sure that the right people are doing the right job? Maybe that's a more general or broad way to ask that question.
Yeah. We will come back to this very specific one after the webinar. I think that makes sense. In general, it has to be, of course, a data governance approach, which means it should be clear about the responsibilities. So who has to do what, when, and this includes, of course, also the verification of data entries and the verification of audit trail reviews. Again, as it's always, the less opportunities there are to add errors, like, for example, if the data transfer or data entering is very automated, we can reduce the level of the necessary audit trail review. Whereas if data has to be transferred from A to B, there have to be probably additional verification measures in place. So I think that's defining how thoroughly we have to review the audit trail.
Okay, great, thank you. And we got 3 more in the pipeline, and then we'll get back to the presentation. But this is great. This is a great Q&A session. Looking at sponsor ensuring. So again, audit trails, right? We got another topic here around audit trails. Looking at risk-based audit trail reviews of our data, would a sufficient solution be to have a process requiring that either sponsor reps define a risk-based approach and document a review, or ensure that our vendors perform this? So really, when we look at that, who's on first, right? Is it the sponsors that are going to say how we do it, or is it the vendor that kind of oversees it and makes sure that it's done? So who's doing it?
Can you answer that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's not so important who does it. We have to highlight, though, that is the responsibility of the sponsor. So if it goes wrong, no matter how does it, the ultimate responsible for that would be the sponsor, because they need to have an overview of the systems and also the vendors that are employed in the trial. Because we will also discuss in the next section about responsibilities. There are different tasks that can be written, agreed in written form, that are delegated to other parties, such as service providers. However, the actual responsibility for all these, even if it's written and agreed, relies with the sponsor according to ICH E6.
Okay, great. And one more, and then we'll go back. This one is on computer system validation. So this is a CSV question here. After reading the EMA guideline on CSV, I had the impression that it had developed in the opposite direction to GAMP5 version 2 and requires validation everywhere, whereas GAMP only requires a qualified installation. How should this be understood? So if we look at the EMA guideline on computer system validation versus GAMP5 version 2.
Yeah, maybe I can take that, because I did also some thoughts on that. I know the direction you're pointing to there. So we got the really strong requirement to have validation available everywhere. So we think that it's still possible to use a risk-based approach as it's outlined in GAM 5, especially also version 2. And I think we should also encourage to do that. I think it came, a lot of that came into this guideline through the experience inspectors obviously made that important validation documents are just not available, and that the regulated parties just outsourced this part and didn't really take care and just said, yeah, the vendor validated the system for me, but then it's of course not validated for the intended use I'm talking about. So again, it goes very much into the same direction as spoken before. But I see that point. We also gave a lot of comments. I was commenting the draft guideline on behalf of PDA also, where we had a group. And we were also discussing about this point. It will be very interesting to see how it develops in the Annex 11 revision, which we saw a concept paper last year or 2 years ago now already, and we will see whether we will see a similar tone there. The concept paper already cross-referenced the EMA guideline on good clinical practice computerized system, as we see that before.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. Now, please, I'll let you guys go back to the slides. We have a couple more questions, but we'll wait till we get to the next Q&A round for that and see what else comes into the pipeline.
Good. Just a quick heads up, Talea, do you want to go for the sponsor responsibilities or for the case studies? Due to the many questions, I think we will skip one of the two topics. What do you prefer?
Maybe we can go to the sponsor responsibilities and leave the case studies if needed.
We can see
the discussion is more important, yes.
Good, thank you. So,
you're welcome.
Let's go ahead.
All right, so the ICH 6 outlines many responsibilities for sponsors on different topics for a clinical trial. However, here we want to focus on those that have to do with data integrity. Next slide, please. Mm-hmm. The first one, as we discussed before, has to do with designing the trial with quality, based on quality by design, by identifying early on factors which are crucial to the quality of the trial, which can be greatly facilitated by the usage of data flow maps, an important tool that we're going to focus on later on, and also with applying quality risk management for the system design and defining the requirements, and managing also the risks to these critical factors for the trial. When it comes to data and acquisition tools, this quality by design can be achieved by ensuring that the systems are fit for the purpose of the trial, by taking into consideration the particularities of the trial, so the indication, the population of the trial, but also the experience of the stakeholders and the personnel that is going to perform the trial. Next slide, please. When it comes to quality management, sponsors need to implement and preserve an appropriate quality management system throughout the trial life cycle and the data life cycle, design and implement efficient tools for data collection and management. Also, as we said before, to follow a risk-based approach, quality by design, and for the critical factors of the study. And of course, it is recommended to follow a quality risk management procedure, which involves risk identification, evaluation, implementation of controls, but also communication of the risk review and continuous reporting. So plans for all these steps. Next one, please. The next topic is very important, and it's often a topic which is not so much taken care of and can lead to serious issues and blames from different parties when something goes wrong. What is very clear from the guidelines is that agreements should be set up in the beginning of the trial, which need to define which activities of a sponsor are given to service providers. And if this is not defined, it is taken as for granted by the authorities that the tasks remain with the sponsor. But again, as we mentioned earlier in the Q&A, the ultimate responsibility of the trial remains with the sponsor, according to ICH 6. The service providers, though, need to be managed in a way from the sponsors in order to operate good in a clinical, good clinical practice environment. That the sponsors should ensure that they follow a robust QMS, and that they can report incidents to them, and also preserve and make accessible the documentation for the systems and the validated status at all times. It is also clear by the guidelines that vendors and service providers that cannot show that they can operate in a way that is compliant with GCP should not be used in a clinical trial. And sometimes this is a very big challenge, because there are vendors which are quite niche and provide a tool or a solution that otherwise a sponsor could not find. However, if they don't have a proper QMS in place, one should really do a risk-based approach and understand what is the stake here. So either you have a good solution but you don't have quality, or you have quality not a good solution. It's a very big topic that we see happening a lot. Next slide, please. Of course, when it comes to data and records, this is an also important topic for sponsor responsibilities. They have responsibilities for handling of the data, which can be facilitated by the usage of flow diagrams, by performing quality control on the data, and also ensure data protection, the implementation of audit trails, and procedures for incident reporting. Also, they need to control the computerized systems by implementing proper user management and access control, incident reporting. Also, assess the investigator systems, a new point from guidances that we will touch upon at the very end, and implement a robust URS to design the systems properly. At last but not least, record keeping and rotation is also an essential component. Next slide. We mentioned already before data flows, and here we're going to focus a bit more on them, because we consider them as an invaluable tool, not only for clinical trials, but also for clinical trials, especially for the GCP setup. They are very important because so many systems are used in parallel, so many different stakeholders, which sometimes are in silos, they don't communicate with each other. So a very good data flow will enable global understanding within the trial of where the data comes from, where it goes, who are the stakeholders that impact the data, and how the integrity of the data can be maintained throughout this process. And this is the basis of a good risk-based approach for identification and control implementation. And it can also be an educative exercise to increase compliance and understanding of data integrity. To our experience, it's very important to have a good process and set up a system in a way that preserves data integrity. And I have here a quote from an FDA representative, Pai, who in the latest joint FDA Health Canada and MHRA Symposium mentioned that the complexity of data flow within decentralized trials, which are more and more into play, increase the risk of introducing data variability and pose risks to quality and integrity. So the more insight we have on the data flows, the less risks we might have, and the better controls we might have. Next slide, please. At the end, we also need to focus on data governance as sponsors, which involves having key processes in place for the data life cycle with focus on data criticality, to protect the data because it's patient data and they should be confidential, to manage systems to ensure fitness for purpose and appropriate use, but also safeguarding important elements of the trial, and support key decision making. Next slide. Now, I'm going to conclude by providing an example of a new requirement for sponsors, which is to assess for fitness systems used by investigators, mostly electronic health record systems that are used to document data from the clinical practice. So sponsors, according to ICH, GCP-E6 are required now to ensure that these systems are of high quality and provide reliable data. And this is an issue, a big concern, because if a phase 3 study, for example, is multinational and multi-center, this might require that a sponsor needs to evaluate 500 sites, 500 systems. How can one do that? The FDA, next slide, please, has a proposal for that. So they encourage, by their guidance for the industry and electronic source data and clinical investigations, to use certified systems that do not require additional evaluations. But also, if this certification is not possible or available, to ensure that there is adequate privacy and security in place, that the site personnel has proper processes for the usage of the systems, the possibility to retain the data, but also that audit trails are implemented and used properly. At the end, if no controls are in place and no certification is in place, the proposal is to do again a risk-based assessment and check if it is really necessary to use a site, the source of the data of which is not really reliable. Next slide. And I would like to conclude this section by focusing on what was presented in this symposium from the agencies as fundamentals compliance for data integrity. And it's also like a summary of what we talked today about. So we need to understand and define the data flow of the trial, which will allow us to identify and manage the risks, and will allow us to validate the systems for their intended use within the data lifecycle, but also to implement adequate controls, procedures, and training to ensure this quality. Which gives us 4 minutes for additional questions or the case studies, whatever.
Yeah, let's take one or two additional questions, James.
Yes, I think it's better.
One, I think it's the last one already. We're far in time, thanks to our active audience. Thank you for the questions.
Well, let me go line us up here. Exactly. We got about 3 more minutes, and I just want to make sure that you all get the links as both. But also, what I want to make sure of is if you look in your invitations when you had the session today, there's also a link to the team members who are presenting today. And this is great. There's been a lot of questions, and I think we possibly will have a follow-up on this session as well. If you have further questions, please let us know, right? Reach out to us. So we're on LinkedIn. Our Outlook email addresses are on there. It's in when you signed up for the session today. There's a link there that you can see the presenters, and you can also reach out directly. So that's there as well. Now let's get to those questions. One of the questions is, how does data integrity play an important role in data migration projects or upgrade of system validation?
Yeah, maybe I take this one. We also get a blog on data migration in general, which is on our website, where we state out what are the common principles and what are also the common measures that you have to do. And of course, it plays a role. So if I have to change a system throughout the clinical trial, or also if I have to create a major update throughout the system life cycle, as mentioned before, it's also a life cycle task. Then, of course, I need to have a risk-based data migration strategy in place, which also includes data verification and ensures Alcoa.
One of the pieces, check out our blog. We have a nice, interesting blog on that as well. But I hope we could answer that question. Another one here: audit trails. How often do audit trails need to be performed?
Audit trail reviews.
Audit trail review.
Probably the question
on the one side
here.
Recording, and as well the other side review of audit trails.
Yeah. Do you want to catch this, Talia, or should I go?
Yes. I'm afraid that my answer is not going to please many people, but it should be a risk-based approach. as everything. So it depends on the criticality of the system and the data it handles, really.
Yeah.
Let me maybe take it one step further, because that is a great answer, and that's a consultant answer, right? It depends, right? And it's a risk-based approach. But is there any guidance document or anything out there that could help guide the audience here a little bit for the next step?
So there's one guidance which is applicable for GMP when it's affecting a decision. Then it should the data, including the metadata, should be adequately reviewed before this decision. Obviously, so that's in the FDA Q&A guideline on GMP, so to say. To my knowledge, on GCP particular, there I'm not sure whether there is a guideline. What I like a lot about frequency of audit trail, and this is my last thought for today, is the PDA guideline, technical report 84 on manufacturing systems, because there we got a table with a nice proposal how to determine the audit trail review frequency, and you can deduct from there the same principle for other situations like this scenario.
Perfect. And there's one last
Can I
question.
add something small?
Go ahead, Talia.
Which is related also to a question which was before. So for in the scope of clinical trials, there should be at least a review of the audit trails before each database log. So if, for instance, of course, before the end of the trial, but also before an interim analysis. So these are the most probable time points that one should do that. However, depending on the criticality, it should be done more frequently, but at least at this point, this should definitely be made.
Okay, great. Well, we are over time. I'm just seeing here. I know we have a couple of more questions in the question pipeline. What I'd like to do is come out to you individually for the questions that you may have. So please do reach out after this call. Let's set up a quick chat or a quick email back and forth, and I'll make sure that we can get those answered as well. This has been a wonderful session. Thank you, Talia. Thank you, Ulrich, for taking your time to present it today and prepare this. Thank you to the audience for your interest in this, as well as in your comments and in your questions. This will definitely help us to make this presentation even better and come back to you with more insights. So thanks again for joining the Compliance Alliance, and have a wonderful day. And all of you will make sure to come back soon.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you, James, for moderating,
nice
and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.